Welcome back to the Girls Power Network podcast. Today's new guest is Fahmi. She's a school psychologist. First of all, where are you from?
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Fahmi. Everyone knows me as Fahmi, but my actual name is Fahmi Moon.
Ooh.
I feel like I have to say that because if I didn't introduce myself
as
Fahmi Moon, my parents would probably be
like,
very upset. So I'm Fahmi, and I'm a school psychologist.
Wow.
And I'm a first-generation Bangladeshi American. I'm originally from New York. I grew up in New York City, and I moved to California 5 years ago to pursue my career as a school psychologist.
Interesting. So what made you want to pursue it here in Los Angeles versus New York?
I don't want to just say the salary, I don't want to just say that, but that was part of it.
Yeah.
But I also do really enjoy the overall lifestyle here in California more than New York City.
Okay.
I feel like growing up in New York my whole life, it definitely has taught me a lot.
Yeah.
I'm New York strong, I definitely built a lot of skills. I feel like if you live in New York, you can live anywhere in the world.
Cool.
But the main reason why I moved out here, I think, was because I was just kind of tired of the fast-paced lifestyle. So I just feel that the lifestyle in New York was hindering my vision of how I wanted to see my future.
Okay.
And I know what's important to me, which is raising a family or, being with my children, my future kids. And so I knew that New York City is just a city of constant work, and there's nonstop,
just go,
hustling.
go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I realized that, I don't want to be here is when after years of living in the city, I never had a family dinner where, I did maybe during Thanksgiving, but I lived under my parents' roof for 24 years until I moved out. And the only time we had family dinners was during special holidays or maybe Thanksgiving.
Wow.
And there were times where I haven't even seen my dad's face after living in the same house for weeks. So I'm like, I don't want this for my future. And I think anywhere else outside of New York City is a little bit more slow paced, and it does allow for more of the family friendly lifestyle that I want.
What was that like, living with your parents and not seeing them that often? Because I know a lot of people do have, same situations where their parents aren't around as often, but it's because of work related stuff, right? It's not because they don't want to be around, it's because they're working.
Right.
How did that make you feel? Did you process that they're working hard, it's not anything personal, or is it still because sometimes you're like, why aren't my parents around, or spending that time, and
you don't want to resent that. You feel, is there any sort of resentment?
Right. So did you feel any of that?
Absolutely not. I think even despite my parents not being in my life, well, I don't want to say them not being in my life.
Yeah.
I feel even though there wasn't time to sit down and have family dinners, the love was never, it was always there. I feel that this is a constant struggle that every first generation immigrant deals with, which is not being able to spend quality time with your family because they're constantly working, and it's something that we were basically just, ingrained with. And we were just kind of like, okay, this is how it is. And it's just, we never questioned it. Right.
Right.
I could tell you my dad, he worked when he first came to this country, he worked $3 an hour.
Wow.
And so he had a family of 4 to raise.
Oh my God.
And
I'm like, I can't even take care of myself.
Right, exactly. And so
God.
it was very tough on him. But I can say this, I've never felt deprived with love, or if I ever wanted a toy, if I ever wanted anything, or even food on the table. He never showed that to me, and so even though maybe growing up they weren't as present, but the love was always evident.
Always there.
It was
That's
definitely
beautiful.
there.
Were they supportive of you moving and pursuing this career, or did they want you, maybe stay in New York and maybe follow in their footsteps, or how did that conversation go?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Bangladeshi, so it is very, very hard. I'm not sure if you're familiar with South Asian cultures and communities.
A little bit, but I would like to know more.
Yes.
Always down to learn more.
Yeah, so living as a female alone, especially away from your parents, let
Mhm.
alone like even if I were to be in New York City,
Yeah.
that's even like, oh my God, forbidden. It's like
Oh,
that,
like if you didn't live with them, like if you lived in your own apartment.
In my own apartment in
Wow.
New York City,
Okay.
it's like, whoa, like this is way out of line. It's not acceptable at all. Like,
Oh.
you know, so it's very looked down upon
Mhm.
until you're married. Like you have to be married and then you go out and live
Yes.
on your own. So that's
It's
when
like older
permissible.
traditions
Exactly,
for sure.
exactly.
Do your parents want that for you? Like, were they like, you should get married young, or have things changed? Because my mom was raised the same way too, where it was like, you should get married young and have a man like kind of take care of you.
Right.
But I was raised so different, and I totally don't see. I'm like, no, I want to have my own
Right.
money and be
Right.
independent, and then like come together.
Yeah. I always feel like our parents, well, my
Mhm.
mom especially, and the way that she grew up
Mhm.
definitely influences her outlook and
Yeah.
her desires for what she wants out of her own daughter, right?
Right.
And so I think they were able to understand
Mhm.
that, okay, we live in a whole different, like, country. We
Mhm.
first of all, a country generation,
Yeah.
like we were exposed to so many different types of cultures.
Mhm.
So they do have that understanding.
Yeah.
But I think that they still want our roots to be within us, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah,
So,
of course.
and which I'm actually so grateful for.
Yeah.
My parents, they were very, very adamant about me knowing how to speak Bangla. So I definitely, you know, that's something that initially I was
Yeah.
very upset about.
You're like, I don't want to learn it.
Yeah, I don't want
But
to.
now you're like,
'cause
the
it's-
more languages, the better.
exactly,
It's
like
hot,
it's so
right?
much easier. Exactly,
Yeah.
it's so much easier for me to speak English because I, you know, that's all I'm seeing around me.
Yeah.
But then now, as I'm older, I'm like, wow, when I go back home to my home country, I can speak to my grandma, I can speak to my family.
Oh, that's
so,
beautiful.
so yeah, so they do have that understanding, but I
Mhm.
think they are a little bit more flexible in terms of
Mhm.
like I'm allowed to have guy friends, maybe not like a boyfriend, but like,
Okay.
you know, like guy friends and things like that. They're
Yeah.
more open about that. They are open with me like in terms of just hanging out and going
Yeah.
out, like maybe after a certain amount of like certain time,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
They're not very anal about that, but I think that when it comes to marriage, that's when it gets very like, okay, you know what, you're not married, like you
Yes.
should be in the house.
Yes.
They were open to supporting me in terms of knowing that, okay, this is what she wants. Let's
Mhm.
take the chance and let's go
Mhm.
for it.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, well, actually, that was my outlook is I really had to convince them that
Mhm.
I really want to do this.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, you know what, we're going to
This is your
support you.
passion? Yeah.
But and I also told
You're
them,
like,
hey,
but
yeah, but I did say that if I do enjoy it,
Yeah.
then I would want to stay there, right? Like
course.
don't expect me to come back
Yeah.
like right away,
Which
but-
is always hard
right,
for a parent.
It is,
but
it
like,
is. But I
you
had
gotta have-
right,
yeah.
right, and so I was under the mindset that hey, like let me try it,
Mhm.
and what's the worst that can happen? If I don't like it, I can always come back home, you know.
Exactly.
And now 5 years later,
You're like, I'm still here.
This is my home now, you know. So I well, New York will always be my
right,
home,
of course.
But yeah,
this is
like,
your
this
new
also-
home.
Exactly.
This is you're creating your
Yeah.
life here.
Yeah, I actually. So I went to grad school in New York,
Mhm.
and I have a master's degree in school psychology.
Nice.
So after I completed my grad school,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I'm not going to live here.
Yeah.
And I know myself.
Yeah.
It's so important to know yourself.
Right.
And I know that once I commit to a job in New York,
Mhm.
I'm going to probably just get comfortable there and
Yeah.
I'm going to like it there. My family's there. My
Right.
friends are there.
Everything's there.
I'm just going to stay there. But if
Right.
I don't take that risk to move now,
I'm
then
not gonna do it later.
I'm not going to do it later.
Yeah.
So I took that initiative to be very, very focused on that
Mhm.
goal of mine.
Yeah.
And I told myself my first job is going to be out of this state. So that's
I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah, because I just know myself.
Yeah.
And so we have national conferences for school psychologists every year. And every
cool.
year they host it in a different state.
Oh, fun.
And so the year that I was graduating, it was in Chicago. So I definitely wanted to go that year because I know that they have a lot of recruiters.
okay.
And I know that's the year that I'm going to start looking for jobs.
Right.
And I want to be out of the state.
Right.
So this is the perfect opportunity for me.
Exactly.
So when I did go to Chicago, I knew that I wanted to come to California.
Mhm.
I've never visited California, but I knew this is where I
You're
belonged.
like, this is where I want to
Yes.
be.
I only knew California through like movies and, you know, Hollywood and just like what I see, right?
Right.
But I've never actually been here.
Never visited
I've
before?
never visited, and
wow.
I made the decision.
And you were just like, I just want to
Yep,
go there.
I just want to go
Palm
there.
trees, I'm in.
That's literally all it took. just palm trees. I kid you not. Palm trees, the
I love
beach.
it. You're like Malibu.
Yeah,
Let's go.
that's it. Exactly. How could you be sad when you see palm trees and, good
True.
weather? And there's
True.
Californians are so spoiled though.
Yeah,
like
we
you
are.
guys are so spoiled.
So
like
spoiled.
after and then now
A
I'm
little
one
bit
of
of
them.
wind, I'm like,
Yeah, and now I feel like I'm one of them after like 2 days of it being gloomy.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm tired. Like,
Yeah.
where's the sun at? Like,
Literally.
basically I decided I'm going to move out here even
Yeah.
despite not knowing anything about, well, never
took a
visited.
risk.
Right, I took a huge
but it
risk.
paid off.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like that's a huge thing to point out is
Yeah.
like taking those risks are terrifying.
Mhm.
But when it pays off, like
Mhm.
it's
Exactly.
all worth it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely worked my ass off prior.
Yeah, you're like, don't get it twisted.
Like prior to moving out here,
Yeah.
I actually worked 7 days a week. For 365 days, I had no days off. I went to
Wow.
grad school 5 days a week, and then I had my internship, and
Wow.
then I worked. I refused to ask my dad for $5 for coffee, so I'm like, I'm
Wow.
going to work on the weekends
That's
because I
amazing.
don't want to ask him for any money.
I love that.
So I also
That's some
worked.
discipline right
Yeah,
there.
so
That
I-
not a lot of people have. Like some
Yeah.
people have the dream, but to have
Yeah.
the discipline and to actually get it done is
Exactly.
totally different.
Exactly. Like I had a vision and I'm like, I have to work my ass off for this, for a year,
Right.
whatever I have to take. I'm going to do it and I'm going to make it happen. So I worked basically 7 days a week.
Wow.
And it wasn't easy,
Mhm.
especially in New York, like during the winter times, you're shoveling snow.
It's freezing.
It's not, that's part of the reason why I also left. Like, I don't want to shovel
Yeah,
snow
you're
to
like,
just leave.
I want my nails
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. No, you're literally shoveling snow.
Like
to
I
get-
broke a nail shoveling
yeah,
snow.
it was not fun. Like, and I
Yeah.
also just don't like the cold, but
Mhm.
like, you're shoveling snow to get out of your driveway and then you're
Right.
shoveling to the parking spot in and
There's
it just,
always keep a shovel in the car.
exactly. It was, yeah. So it was not fun during, the winter
Right.
times.
Yeah.
So, like I just knew that this just was not
Yeah.
my thing.
Yeah.
And so I went to the conference,
Yeah.
back to the conference,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I know that I don't want to be in New York, maybe Florida,
Okay.
maybe California,
Uh-huh.
maybe Texas,
Oh,
definitely
okay.
not like, I don't know, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Because you can't
Everyone
have
from Nebraska
yeah,
is like,
I'm sorry.
hey.
Yeah, sorry. But I mean, I
Yeah.
just can't. I mean, I've been to Nebraska. It's really cool, but just, sorry, not my vibe. But yeah, I think that like coming from New York City,
Yeah.
you definitely can't, I don't know, it's hard to adjust to a
Right.
place where there's just
No.
corn.
Yeah. Literally, like
No offense.
you
but
go from like doing
Yeah.
fast pace to like
Right.
silence.
Like, yeah.
a fly.
Exactly. So I can't. But so I knew that it was between those three. And so then I did some more research
Mhm.
and I kind of noticed like I just did research about school districts, like, okay,
Oh.
which school offers
What
what.
were you looking for exactly? Like what are key things to look out
Like,
for in that situation?
Just resources that they have.
Okay.
Also, obviously, like, salary is important too, because
Mhm.
if you're living in a state that
That's expensive.
yeah, that's expensive. You want to be able to afford that
Yeah.
lifestyle. And you
Yeah.
also have to know yourself as to, okay, what kind of lifestyle do you want to pursue? Are you okay with just like a small studio apartment and like not going on fancy like dinners
Wow.
or taking yourself
Well
out?
said, yeah.
Right? Or, do you want that more
Extra
elevated lifestyle where
right.
you're like, okay,
Mhm.
no, I want to go out, I want to travel, and
Mhm.
I want to live in a 1-bedroom apartment and pay X, Y,
Right.
and Z, right?
How were you able to like set those goals for like obviously I'm sure you would want the freedom, right?
Right.
And the travel and like this and that, be able to pay your rent. How do you aim for something? How do you like get to that goal?
Everything just basically always goes towards, okay, what is your salary? Based on your salary, how are you going to be able to achieve that? And you have to always be realistic, right?
Right.
With yourself.
Yes.
And I really
Yes.
try to follow like, the 30% rule where, you should never go past that, in terms of your rent, right? Like if you're
Right.
paying rent, you should not be like paying more than that. Even that might be, I get it that it's really hard to do that with this economy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But, as long as you're as close to it as you can,
Mhm.
because you don't want to go broke trying to look rich, right?
Right.
So
Well said.
and I think that that's so important to be able to understand your own reality, know what you want, and sometimes you have to take an L for a little bit, and that's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
like, and then so that's
Exactly.
kind of what I did for the year. I took that
You
huge-
sacrificed your weekends too.
Right,
Like you worked
exactly.
7 days. No,
Yeah.
but like when you said that, I was like, I can totally relate to that because like when I went to film school, the bachelor's program is supposed to be 4 years, but I was like, no, I want to do it in the least amount of time that I can. I'll give up my summers to do it in 3 years.
Exactly.
So I didn't travel for 3 summers. And
Yeah.
that's like shocking to me because I love to travel. I
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
I live for it, right? So, but it also just shows you like I got it done in 3 years. I was out of there in a year
Right.
faster than I was supposed to be. But
Wow.
it's because I
That's
gave up my summer. So
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah.
like when I heard that, I was
Yeah.
like, I can totally relate to
No,
that.
you have to take that like temporary sacrifice.
Right.
But a lot of people, you know, it does sound scary. 3 years. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take 3 years of my life.
It's
Like that
no.
sounds,
Yeah.
but then later you see how rewarding it is. Like it definitely
Exactly.
is. So I will say that was rewarding. If I can go back in time, I would do it all
Mhm.
over again.
Mhm.
But so I had basically went to that national conference,
Mhm.
and after, you know, figuring out which state I want to go to, and, you know, like
Yeah.
also I didn't really choose. It was Florida was like my plan too,
Yeah.
but you know, the palm trees were there too.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
but again, like I didn't really, you know, I didn't enjoy the way, I didn't feel that their school district had a lot to offer as much as, you know, like California did.
Yeah.
So you definitely do have to do your research in terms of like, okay, what direction do I want to go? So then there were many other states there that was recruiting. There was Utah, there was, you know, Nevada.
So pretty much every state was recruiting.
Yeah, but you know what? I really wanted to find California, but I couldn't, like I was looking for the little stand, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, where's California?
Where's she
Like,
at?
where-
Yeah.
And I didn't find it. And I was kind of a little sad. I'm like, okay, I guess they're like too cool to be here. So then one of my friends, he was like, hey, Fahmi, like I know you wanted to, you know, pursue your career in California. They're right over there. I'm like, what nooks and crannies? Like, where were they? Like, you know, they were in this little corner. And I'm like, okay, I'm definitely gonna just go and like just inquire. So I did, and then I asked them like, hey, what is it? The first thing they did, I know that just to, you know, grasp everyone's attention, is like they just have their salary like out there, and it's like, oh, okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they kind of wanted to like I guess attract the psychologist and like, hey, this is like sell themselves in a way. But again, you have to be mindful that they're paying a lot higher, but again, it's the cost of living is also just as
a lot higher
exactly
than Nebraska.
Exactly. Yeah. So and then I asked them and I said, hey, like, you know, I'm interested, and how would I go about this? And they're like, okay, well, when are you graduating? They asked a little bit about me and said, okay, are you ready for an interview tomorrow? I'm like, whoa, tomorrow?
Oh, you're like, I guess.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I wasn't ready for tomorrow, but sure, like, let's do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
So then I go to the interview the next day, and I got the job right there and then. So I got the job in California while I was in Chicago. So yeah,
Love it.
Exactly.
Love that.
Exactly. And so once they confirmed that I got the job, I did not even go about looking for jobs in New York.
Like,
I was
out.
like, I'm done. Like, there's no need to look. If you think about it, I had it pretty, like, very, like, well planned and pretty easy, because looking for jobs is so difficult.
So stressful, too. Especially if you're, like, moving to a new place and then start looking. No. Like,
exactly.
that's too much stress. And if you don't find something right away, then you're just like, it doesn't start the move off, like, right. You know, you're, like, scrambling to, like, pay rent, find work. Like,
And so I was just like, okay, what is it that I have to do to get to this point? And, you know, their hiring process wasn't as difficult because New York City and California had reciprocity. So basically they did honor a lot, you know, basically all of my credits.
Nice.
And all I had to do was just take a basic, you know, math, reading, writing test, you know, very big.
Cool.
But it sounds easy, but
I suck at math, so I'm like,
the math part killed me, girl. I was like, I don't remember all these
all I can do is count
formulas.
money. Like, leave me alone.
Yeah, I don't. And like, you know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared is like, I never used it in my life. And I don't know why.
I went to film school, so I'm like, no. They're like, you have to take a math class to pass a bachelor's program, and I literally was like, why?
Exactly. So I definitely had to do a lot of, you know, just like refreshing my memory.
Right.
I don't remember 8th grade math. You know, I have.
Who does?
Yeah. So then I took the test, passed it, and then, you know, here I am. And I just, you know, after I moved here, at first it was very different because the way that I was taught in grad school, they're all, you know, they teach you based on New York State standards. And so
that makes sense.
I just had to basically apply all those skills that I learned in New York State standards and just apply it in California. But there's restrictions, right? Every state has like, there's different ways of practicing. Exactly. So I, you know, I just kind of like learned on the whim. I was like, it was, you just kind of
go for it and you kind of learn it. You pick it up as you go.
Exactly. So that's kind of, and I already have the skill set, you know, and I have the credential to, do what I need to do, but I
Right.
think it's more just like learning how to navigate your way through different rules and different, styles of practice.
Right.
So in New York, they are more focused on counseling. There was which I love. That's my favorite part.
Okay.
So just to give you a little
I was
background.
gonna ask. I was like, tell me what your day-to-day looks like.
Okay.
For people who have no idea like what a psychologist does.
Okay, so a school psychologist is a lot of people actually didn't even know, I myself didn't even know that a school psychologist existed. I thought it was a counselor.
Because I actually did go to counseling in school.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, oh, I might know a little bit about this. But okay.
I didn't even know what a school psychologist was.
It's totally separate than a counselor.
It is.
Okay.
It's very different. And I actually wanted to be a pediatrician initially.
No way.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And then I took like my first course of biology and I'm like, this is not for me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, mom and dad. Sorry to break it to you. I'm not going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
But I think what was the most appealing for me with this job is one, I love psychology. Like I have such a passion.
It's a really cool subject.
It is amazing. And it's just, I feel like with any field, you just understanding the way psychology works is so important. So I love psychology and I know I love children,
Cute.
and I think that I wanted to combine those interests and like figure out, okay, what can I do to, fulfill my passion?
Yeah.
And so I was just looking up jobs and I'm like, okay, I know that I want to have a schedule where I can be an active mother, and be an active, just actively involved in my family's lifestyle. And I know being a doctor is that's going to be difficult,
Right.
Nothing against doctors, kudos to you guys, but it's very difficult. So, I kind of just like, I've had that vision and then I'm like, okay, what are my options now? Given my degree, you need to pursue higher education too, if you're in the field of psychology, because you can't do much. You're very limited with just a bachelor's degree in psychology.
Right. I would think so.
Exactly. You need to pursue higher education. And so I knew that I was going to get my bachelor's in psychology, but I'm like, what next? Because I know it can't stop here.
Right.
Like it's not, and it's not going to pay me well. So I'm like, I definitely need to, you know. So then I looked at all my options and I was like, oh, school psychology, this sounds very appealing. Like you get summers off. And then I looked at the requirements. I'm like, okay, this definitely
fits.
I
qualify.
Yeah, this fits my interest. And so that's kind of like how I went about it.
And you like called them and you're like, hey, like I'm interested. And you just went in for an interview or did you apply on their website?
Yes. So this is one of like, I think the most helpful advice that I can give to anyone that's interested in, I would say in any field. If you're applying for grad school or if you're even applying for a job position, the first thing you should do is you need to explore and you need to gain knowledge as to what it is and who it is that you're applying for. You need to understand them before they understand you.
Yes.
So you need to know exactly what it is that you're going for because they're going to ask you questions that you need to be able to answer what appeals to them, right? So for my program, for my grad school program, I went to grad school in Queens College. I knew that they were very big on being culturally competent. Okay. And so it helps that I'm brown. Right. But I think that the most important thing that I noticed, what I did was I read through their pamphlet. Okay. I emailed the coordinator and before I even applied, I got her comfortable with me. Nice. And I emailed her and I said, hey, I'm very interested in applying and I would love to meet with you to discuss how I would pursue this, you know? And she said, of course, like, let's meet together. And when I met with her, she was asking me a lot of questions that, and then I would answer based on what I know is important for the program. So I'm basically, I kind of already have that I'm one step ahead, basically, because I know exactly what it is that they're looking for. And I'm kind of, just saying those, the highlighted words like culturally competent.
Yes, like the words they want to hear.
They want to hear, And so she said, how did you even know about it, a school psychologist or do you know what we do? And so I'm like, I actually don't know. And she said, do you know anyone that is a school psychologist? And I said, no, I don't. But which I actually did. I YouTubed just
shout out YouTube University.
Yeah, I YouTubed just interviews with school psychologists because I didn't have access to a school psychologist myself to talk to them, So I actually went on YouTube and I just kind of Googled interviews with school psychologists. What do they do? I just used whatever resource I had. Yes. And at that time it was YouTube. I didn't know anyone directly. And and she was my next resort into asking and inquiring about this field. And so after that meetup, she's like, hey, she asked me my name again. She said, do you have your transcript on you? She's like, I'll just hold on to it. And then I said,
Love
okay.
that. That's a good sign, right?
That is a great sign. And I'm like, yeah, I do actually. And so you always have to have it prepared, your resume, your transcript, all of that, whatever's needed.
Yeah.
I'm like, here you go. And then so she just kept it to the side. She's like, okay, it was lovely meeting you. And then, so my grad school program is actually very, very rigorous in terms of their acceptance rate. They only accept 30 applicants every year.
Stress.
So I'm not gonna lie, I was like, am I even gonna get this job? I did believe in myself, but I was also like, I just graduated from undergrad. They probably want someone who's more qualified, right? And so I wasn't 100% sure, but I did apply to other programs. And, you know, thankfully, I got accepted right away, and you know, I wasn't on a wait list or anything. I got in the moment that they accepted me. I'm like, okay, I knew that that's the school I wanted to go to, so I kind of just like, you know, like, I went for it. Exactly. Just going through the process of doing your own research, like figuring out, you know, what it is that you're applying for. What are they looking for? What can you offer to them? And do you have those skills that they want?
Do you really fit? Do you really want to be a part of that school?
Exactly.
Yeah, you really want to read all the fine print.
Yeah, exactly.
So now that you're working at the school, you're seeing students, right? And what do they come to you for? Like, what's going on when you see them?
Okay, so a big part of my role is obviously counseling, right? As a part, you would think psychologist, counseling, therapy, right? So that is a big part of my job. Also, I do a lot of assessments. So I assess kids to determine if they meet criteria for special education. So the referrals would come through either parents or teachers or, you know, service providers. And they would bring it to my attention, or they would say, bring it to the attention of the school and say, hey, I'm concerned about my kid. They're struggling here. And so if they would like an assessment, then they would request one. And then that's where I come in and I would do a full comprehensive assessment. And a part of my assessment consists of, I look into their general ability, so their cognitive functioning. I do IQ testing. And then I also look into their social emotional functioning. And then I look into their motor abilities and adaptive ability. So it's very comprehensive. It's not just like you would think the social emotional piece, or you know,
everything. It's like the whole package.
It's very comprehensive.
Because I feel like that is the right thing to do to really evaluate a child and be like, you need to be in this class.
You have to look at them holistically, not just
Because like when I was younger, so my first language is German. I lived in Austria. So, cool. So I moved here and I literally was like so bad at like reading and writing. I was so embarrassed. I was in ESL. And so I had to meet with a counselor, and like she kind of like I don't know, diagnosed me or something. I don't know if that's the right term, but she like you know, we did different testing, and then I never like got extra time for testing or anything, but it was on like the teacher's radar, like, okay, like English isn't her first language, like cut her some slack a little bit. But I know there's like different like tiers of like help.
No, that's actually one of the that's very important that you bring that up, because a lot of times we confuse second language learners for having a disability, and really it's that they're not grasping it's like, okay, imagine your first language is English and now you go to China and they're just speaking in Chinese and you're like expected
but you don't know
to
that
perform.
As a kid, you think that you're dumb.
I
can speak from experience. No like teacher at my school made me ever feel like I was like smart, and I always felt very like insecure about my grades. And when I realized like if you just had like a supportive like counselor or teacher, that could have been so different. Because that's what discouraged me to apply to like four-year universities. I was like, I just got to go to community college. Like I'm not smart enough. I'll just go to film school. But like it just shows like it has such an effect on children.
No, that really breaks my heart to hear. Because I think you know why? I am so passionate about kids, and like I feel like if you had the right support system at that time,
things would have
like I really emphasize that, and I think like every single person has a purpose in life, right? Like, and I think once you find your purpose, it's you have to kind of embody that, and also, you know, you definitely have to believe in yourself, and then you have to apply it, right? And so I knew my purpose was working with kids and helping them be the best version of themselves, and like just being there for them when, you know, they had nobody, right? Exactly. Or when they feel like less than, and it can literally shift the direction
change their
that
whole
child's life. Like and I think that's why I'm so passionate about this, is because, you can literally change a person's life. You know, if
it all starts from childhood too. You don't even notice until
all the trauma
later.
starts from childhood.
Literally,
everything starts from childhood.
I'm like, oh shit, that kind of
exactly. Yeah. And so I think that like having that either mentor or just and you know, someone to look up to, just someone who believes in you. That's it. Like, is so critical, and it's so important to be able to help this child just, you know, believe in themselves. And another thing that I really, I feel like we're going off tangents, but what's so important
it's important because that's part of your job too. And and so many people have children, right? Children, they're the future. So it's like, we need to make sure that they're in good hands. We don't want just anybody being like, oh yeah, like, no, they're not picking up the material. They're done. No, that's not it. Like, some people are terrible test takers. Like, I'm not a good test taker either. I get nervous sometimes, and I know the information, but like, when it comes to the test, I'm like, I don't know. Yeah.
So I think the best and most important attribute you can have as a child and instill in a child is self-confidence. Like, more than anything, honestly. Like, if you can instill that in a child, they are untouchable. You know, if you believe in your own truth, you believe you can do it. You believe that, you know, no, I am greater than what people think of me. The single most important attribute you can teach your child, and even like as adults, we need that, right? Like, if you're gonna like process every single opinion that exists,
oh my god,
you are going to drive yourself
crazy,
insane, right? Like, you're going to
never
like
make it.
You should never like marinate on those ideas. Only allow and attract, you know, the positive. Of course, you know, we're humans and we do like sometimes let negative comments get to us, but I think just once you have your own truth and you know who you are, nothing can touch you, you know. And I think that's so important to instill in children. And everything, any type of like emotional outburst or anything, and I think just like any adversity would, the way you handle it is so important. And I feel like based on your self-confidence, it really reflects on how you handle things, right? Like, how much you believe in yourself, 100%. What you allow. So I think that was definitely, and that's why I think working with children and just instilling those skills is so important, because once they learn it in childhood, then they'll keep it in adulthood. Pick up on it. Exactly. It's very hard to unlearn things that you've
like good
been taught consistently.
Exactly.
So
what kind of like you were saying, you do emotional testing and IQ testing. Like, what, like, can you explain like what kind of tests those are? Like, what do they look like?
So in California, well, in the school district that I work for, they don't really just have one IQ and just label you as, okay, you're in the below like average, you're this. It's a very comprehensive, like I said, approach. And so they not only just they don't look at just numbers, right? Like, let's say if I were to administer, so one of the more common tests is called the WISC, and it's a test of intelligence, but we administer the CAS-2 system, and so that's what it's called. And it looks into different processing areas. And we don't just look at, you know, a number and say, okay, this is your child, they performed in the average range or below average range, and this is where they stand. No, we look at, you know, other forms of data. We basically, you know, interview, and we also have a bunch of observations. So it's just looking at the child holistically. So we don't have one specific, like, we don't just assess and then there's one, you know, it yields a overall IQ score. We don't actually report that. We look into the overall ability of the child, their strengths and some areas of need.
Got it.
So that's more of like the, you know, we call it general ability. So that's what it's called. That's more of the general ability component to it. And the social emotional is looked at, you know, we assess through using rating forms, we interview the parents, we have our own observations, we interview the child itself, and, you know, the child sometimes completes rating forms themselves. So, you know, it's a very long and thorough process.
Which is so nice to hear, though, because I feel like if it was just like, oh, we base it off one IQ test, and like I said, not everyone's a good test taker, and then you're just like labeled as like whatever it is, you know?
And going back to like what you said, like, you know, you were an English language learner. That's one of the things that I think I noticed where it was so, and historically there was a lot of lawsuits because of this, and so that's why we do this thing called where if you have a kid who's an English language learner, by law, you have to do a bilingual test to determine, is their second language the primary reason for them not being able to access their curriculum, or is it, you know, are they fluent in both, you know, languages? So you basically are ruling out second language being the primary factor. Like, why are they struggling in school? Is it because they don't know the language?
I think I was like right in the, like I was like I wasn't smart enough, I guess, to like not be an ESL, but I
Mhm.
wasn't like good enough to like
Right.
not like it was like a weird middle.
Yeah, I will say though, like the testing procedures and just the requirements have
Yeah.
significantly improved. Like
I'm so happy for that.
it just and
I'm
all
so
of it,
happy.
you know, and it's all like tailored from lawsuits that happen, and so because of
I'm
that,
like, I'm glad somebody had to do it.
yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't me, but
exactly. Because of that, you know, they made new laws and regulations, and I think that's so important because it's true. I don't want to label a kid who, you know, and it's common they'll label them as having autism because there's social deficits, right? And so when you have a social deficit, but you don't, you know, it's like, okay, is it really a social deficit, or is it because they don't speak the language, so they appear as though, like they're socially incompetent, you know? So that's why you always have to rule out the first language. And so after we rule that out, and then we have to rule out, well, first you have to rule out help. You have to rule out, can the kid see and can the kid hear, right? Like, if they can't see, they can't hear, then they're going to
That's already,
exactly. And then, you know, rule out language. And then after that, it's like, okay, now we can get a true assessment of this child's capabilities. And so that's why it is very important to, you know, kind of just really understand the child as a whole, like not just judge them based off one
100%.
assessment.
What would you say is the hardest part about your job?
Okay, so I would say that the least favorite part about my job would be writing reports. I write a very long 30-40 page reports for each. And guys, it's not even double spaced, and it's font 11.
It's not font 12, not Times
font
New
12,
Roman or whatever.
No, it's single spaced, you know, and I'm writing exactly. So that I would say maybe like the hardest and probably, you know, my least favorite, because my favorite part is obviously working with the kids. I love working with them, and so and I also work for a very high profile school. It's a charter school. Okay. So yeah, and so I am constantly like dealing with parents. Maybe there are some, you know, maybe entitlement issues, or there's advocates or attorneys that I'm always encountering. But I will say that, you know, having a supportive staff and coworkers make the biggest difference.
Have you ever dealt with a situation where maybe, I don't want to say like the parent was in denial about the kid's situation or something, but like where maybe they gave you a little bit of pushback, where it was like questioning you or your like assessment?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah,
you're like
but you know what? Yeah, I would say more recently, it's the parents that push the school to label them, because I think it's because of the, you know, the resources that they'll get. Our times when we were like going to school, I think there was a negative stigma with special education. Totally. Right? There was like, oh, you're in special ed.
Getting pulled out to go to get extra time.
Exactly.
Always. There's always eyes. And I hate how negative like all that shit was.
But now it's like the parents are like, no, label my kid. My kid has something, label them. And I'm getting these, I'm getting these services, you know? And, you know, like, okay, if a kid really has something going on, absolutely, you know, get your resources, help that kid, right? But a lot of times, like, I think they create something out of nothing, and you know, they really, really want us to find something just so because they feel entitled to that service. And you know, it's also a disservice to pull a kid out of the classroom when they don't really need that help, right? Like you're taking them out of their academic instruction, you're limiting their social exposure, right? So yeah, it's definitely, I do come across parents that
it's part of the job, right? I mean, not everything's gonna be picture perfect.
Right, but working in high profile schools, I think the parents are definitely more knowledgeable about special ed and about what, you know, so it really depends. I think your experience depends on what
the school
district and how well funded it is, and you know, the socioeconomic status.
I didn't even think about that.
So like you know, and okay, this is funny, but one way that you can identify what school that you're working for is you just go there and you see what cars are pulling up
in the drive,
and dropping these kids off.
If there's a Tesla or Range Rover, you're probably at a good school.
Exactly. And so like when I came in, I'm like, whoa, like there's like, you know, G-Wagons and Porsches, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is the school I'm at, you know? So that was a big indication of like what school you're working
demographic
for.
you're working with too. So, what would you say is, like, if somebody wanted to start out and do this, what is some piece of advice you could give them?
Well, I would say that I definitely love what I do. And if that is something that you are interested in, it is a very rewarding job. It's very difficult, and it's not easy. You devote a lot of time, but I think the most important thing is to have boundaries and know, like, you know, just know that you're there, you're working your 8-hour shifts or whatever amount of, you know, hours you're expected to work, and just set your boundaries. Don't make work your life, right? Unless this, unless you're so passionate about it that like this is your, don't forget about your other interests, right? I think what happens is when you start working and that's all you do, like you're just focused on work, you forget about your passion, right? And so I think don't forget to pursue the other passions that you have and set those boundaries. And it is definitely rewarding because if you love to travel, this is a perfect job for you. Like,
yeah, summertime off.
I get to plan.
When you go back to school?
I already started. So,
so you're back in school. Summer's over for her.
Yeah. You get to plan vacations a year in advance. You know exactly when you're going to be off.
Tickets are cheaper when you plan in advance.
Exactly. So they give you a calendar years in advance, and you get the summers off. So that's always the best part of it. Is definitely like the schedule, and it does accommodate to anyone that loves to travel. So
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing all that. I think it's very insightful to learn about children, our future, and how you guys assess children, because I mean, you already told me how much things have changed. Like I was like, I definitely didn't get that kind of treatment in school. Maybe it's because I went to public school too. I don't know if that makes a difference. It might. Yeah. But it's very refreshing to hear that, and it makes me happy that kids won't feel like they're dumb anymore just because English isn't their first language. So my final question would be, how do you like being a part of GPN?
I am very, very honored, and I feel that being a part of a network that supports and empowers women is something that, like, I think it's a privilege, right, to be a part of that. I've always supported women. I've always been a girl's girl, and I think in any field or anywhere that you can connect with women and understand their values and elevate them and just basically come together and just share your knowledge, right? Like that is so important because women are always, well, I guess all of us, men, women, but especially women, we understand each other's struggles, right? We do. And so just feeding each other that knowledge and just being able to contribute to a community that offers a lot of support for, for women. It's just, I think it's a very, very powerful message, and it definitely is, in general, an empowering feeling. So
yes, well, thank you for being a part of the group and coming on the podcast and sharing everything. It was amazing talking to you. And I can't wait to see all the things that you do and all the children you make feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Bye.